David Malpass is sitting right next to me. David Malpass is a Trump Economic Advisor, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yes, I've got to get your title right. Trump Economic Advisor.
Senior Economic Advisor.
Okay. Now, I say that Trump underpolls in the United States because people say you're a hater if you support Trump. So he underpolls. I think there's more support for him than people give him credit for.
I think that's right. I think people are desperate for change. They're desperate for stronger leadership. They don't want to speak out, so far. But as the momentum grows, there will be more of that. People willing to say that they really want something different. A problem here, a big problem, is Secretary Clinton represents a continuation of the old regime. And so the UK vote is very important because it shows people are willing to vote, and the margin was much bigger than expected, willing to vote for change.
Now, Donald Trump said he wanted the Brits to leave. He thought that they should leave. That was largely for sovereignty reasons and immigration reasons. But the Brits ignored the threat that they were going to go into a recession if they left. They ignored that. Do you think that they will go into recession?
No, I don't think so. And I think that people overstated the case against because that was the fashionable thing to do, and also because it was an election. It's very rare that people actually get to vote on change. Most of the European Union countries that joined, the people didn't actually get to vote. Sure. Their parliaments did it. The establishment did it. So this is a big sign that globalism has exceeded its bounds. Remember, Obama and Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, had both basically campaigned. They'd gone to the UK, said, don't leave. That was the voice of globalism, and that was rejected in the vote.
Now, look, you're a Trump Economic Advisor. You're also a guy from Wall Street. I know you well. You've worked in the economics business, if I can say that, for many, many years. What's the negative for the United States of America from the British decision to leave?
Well, I don't think it's a negative. The question is, what do people do as the EU evolves? I'm worried that the EU is in decline. That's probably good, but then
I think it's going to break apart.
That's right. But leadership
matters. That's bad for us.
No, I don't think that's right at all. What we want is a faster growing world, and the EU bureaucracy has stood in the way of that. It's in the U.S. interest to have Europe growing a lot faster.
But how will Britain's exit from Europe make them grow faster? How will it break the Brussels socialist bureaucracy?
That's where leadership comes in. There are already calls in Netherlands and France for their own referenda. And as EU introspects, they look inside themselves and say, why is it that those Brits didn't want to be in? And in fact, the polls are showing the French don't want to be in. And that's the chance for change. I really think that you can have constructive commercial relations between countries. We've too much had centrally planned trade in the guise of free trade. It's these giant written deals that only lawyers can understand. And I think there's a good chance for better trade, more trade in Europe if they find a new path.
It'll take a while, though. It's going to take a long time for that. You can't bust apart a bureaucracy just like that. You can't do it.
Right. So one problem is we're moving from the status quo, which worked for the rich. Bond issuance has been huge. If you're big enough to issue bonds, you're doing well in this economy. And moving toward one that's more focused on small businesses, Trump has proposed cutting the taxes on businesses, not just corporations, but small businesses, whereas Mrs. Clinton wants higher taxes on small businesses through the individual income tax. And so that's the distinction that's going on. Do you want more growth or less growth?
Well, I really want some growth in this economy.
So?
I'd love to see 4% growth sustained for at least a couple of years. I think that would really help everybody, especially the middle class in the United States. Now, Donald Trump's plan is to cut corporate tax rates, to cut individual tax rates, and to cut the taxes which apply to small business. That's a whole bunch of tax cutting. Is his entire growth plan based on cutting taxes?
No, clearly.
Largely?
I wouldn't even say largely. One thing he says and makes clear is that when he talks with voters, they're actually even more incensed by the regulatory policy of the government even than the tax policy. So I think you have to do both. You have to have more effective regulation. We have this giant government overreach that has a chance to be rolled back. That's what creates growth. You get lots more jobs, meaning millions and millions of more jobs, if you've got the federal government more within its own boundaries.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, Stuart,
No,
Hillary Clinton just now tweeting out another statement that runs counter to what you're saying, David Malpass. She says our first task has to be to make sure that the economic uncertainty created by the events in Great Britain does not hurt working families. That speaks to more government spending to get the Bernie Sanders vote to stay in her camp and not go to Donald Trump.
I think that's right, David.
Right. So that's going to be a call by big government types to say fear that you've got to be afraid if governments get smaller, you'll be left in the lurch. The reality is, I think people, and certainly people in England, realized that they could make more money if they weren't so tied down by a big bureaucracy.
Before we leave this, I just want to ask the following question. It's something that I've been saying all morning. I may be right, may be wrong. I think that the British vote has an impact on American politics. I think the impact is Hillary lost some ground and credibility, and Donald Trump gained some ground and credibility. Did he?
That's very clear, certainly, because people are voting for more independence from their big government. In the case of the UK, it was from Brussels, and that was distinct, and it didn't show up in the polls. So the point you made on that Trump is probably his polls are probably under what's actually available is a good one.